Well, the election is set to be another big one for independent MPs after the so-called teal wave of the last election. Climate 200, the crowdfunding group, is shifting some of its money towards other newer community independent candidates after some of the more prominent candidates like Allegra Spender have decided to take less or no funding from the organisation at all. Kylea Tink was the independent MP for Bradfield in North Sydney. The seat got abolished and now she's campaigning instead for others. She joins me from Brisbane. Welcome.
Hi, Patricia.
So you've been appointed Director of the Community Independence Project. What is that project and what will be your role?
Yeah, actually, it's really exciting. The Community Independence Project has been around basically since Cathy McGowan was first elected back in Indi in 2013, but it's not something that has ever sought to have a very high profile. It's been very focused on doing the work that needs to be done on the ground to support communities who want to take their voice and their vote back. And actually, Patricia, you know what's really interesting is that 1 in 4 electorates in this 2025 campaign will have a community independent running. And I think that says everything about the way that Australians are really stepping up and saying they want to be more involved in our democracy. They're tired of waiting for the two major parties to solve the problems that they're facing, and they're prepared to actually take their voice and their vote back and send people like those we've seen in the 47th Parliament to the crossbench to hold both the major parties to account.
Are you concerned about some of the more well-known teal candidates or MPs running for re-election pulling back from Climate 200 funding? What's your analysis of what's happening?
No, look, I think, 2022 was a really interesting election in that I think people like myself were largely discounted by a number of players in the political sphere. They either saw it as a flash in the pan or something where, we'd get all excited into the lead up to the election, but we wouldn't get elected and we'd, go and take a Bex and have a lie down for the next 3 years. People were shocked to see the size of the crossbench grow in the 2022 election. We've had the largest crossbench in the history of Australian politics. And I think what we've proven is that we've actually been an incredibly constructive force in politics in the last 3 years. We fought and were able to achieve more ambitious climate goals. We fought and were able to achieve a return of integrity into politics with the NAC. We've really taken the baton, again and again around women and gender issues. And I think ultimately, even a senior member of the parliamentary environment said to me, we changed the climate, we changed the vibe in Parliament. So I think what we're seeing coming into 2025 is that those people that ran in 2022 are very committed. They will continue to carry the torch for their own communities, but they've been able to inspire a whole heap of other communities to say, hey, we want what they're having. We want to be represented in a way which is more authentic to what our ambitions and goals are. And we can see that actually when you send somebody like that to the House, they can make a difference.
I spoke to former Labor Senator, but, someone who works basically on election polling and demographic analysis, John Black, a little earlier, and he said there is a little bit of a backlash to some teals as well. He called it a backlash to everyone almost. Everyone running is getting some kind of backlash, all for different reasons. And it brings me to the case of Monique Ryan, who, of course, was in the spotlight over the last week, her husband pulling down signs. They apologised, but they were therefore depicted, and obviously it was a unfortunate scene, as just being like other politicians. Is that unhelpful to trying to... Obviously that's one person, not all of the candidates are the same, but of establishing your credentials as being different to other politicians?
Look, I think that's such an interesting example, Patricia, because the truth of the matter is we don't talk about it a lot here, but politics in this country is brutal. And actually, I think about what's happening in 2025 compared to 2022. In 2022, I thought it was tough. The hand-to-hand kind of battle that goes on the ground when it comes to specific electorates, it gets very personal, it gets very tense, it gets very tough. And I think what we're seeing in 2025 is a whole new level when it comes to that, because, in 2022, as I said before, many of us were discounted We were kind of seen as a bit of a flash in the pan. I know for a fact that, both Mon and her husband are deeply apologetic about what happened. Pete knows that in that moment it was not the right decision. I think his reasoning for doing it was absolutely admirable. In his head, it was a sign on a piece of public land where it shouldn't have been. But then the filming of it and the politicisation of that filming, I think, says everything about what is the dirty tactics in politics. I think what's hard for people like myself and for Mon is that we have consistently run on an idea that politics can be done differently. We don't need to go to that stoop to those levels. It can be something that people are drawn into because they sincerely care about public service. We want to have our lives, turn up, do the public service we can do for the time that we can be relevant, and then we can get back on with the rest of our lives. So, but at the end of the day, we're still human, and Mon is copping an absolute caning in her seat. There's a lot of very dirty tactics being executed. Understandably, her husband is protective of her, as is everybody who loves us, because at the end of the day, we are largely ordinary people that found ourselves in pretty extraordinary circumstances, and that goes for our families as well.
Look, I'm not going to talk about the complexities of how people feel, because I think people do have strong feelings for their family and whatever, but it's about, I suppose, painting a picture of yourself as being more pure than others, and then the truth, that's, at the end of the day, there's shades of grey, right?
Oh, look, and I think at the end of the day, people are people, and I think that in some ways, I am in this really unique experience. I've been able to be the federal member for North Sydney for 3 years, and I'm actually leaving undefeated. I was the first female elected to that role. I'm leaving because my seat's been abolished, and I'm leaving before I've become institutionalised. And if I can kind of offer something to all Australians, the truth is that anybody who's turning up at a politician in any colour is ultimately a human being, and humans are fundamentally flawed for the decisions that we make sometimes. I do think there is a difference in the way that the community independent movement is built. Fundamentally, it comes from the grassroots. The community is mobilised first, and then they go and find somebody from within their community and ask them to run for them. And it creates a very unique compact between the community and the candidate in terms of how you turn up. And, I do know in every single instance, in the 38 seats where they're running at the moment, the emphasis is on positivity, it is on respect. It is on trying to turn up as the best version of yourself in every instance, regardless of what you're facing. And I think that's a really positive thing for our democracy. If we can get more of that happening across the board, I've been accused of being a Pollyanna in the past, but maybe we can find a way of doing politics differently in this country that actually means we are moving forward positively.
Just finally, you're in Peter Dutton's electorate of Dixon.
I am.
You really think you can make a dent in his vote?
Actually, I am here to say Queensland is the dark horse in the 2025 election. And I think, in fact, even the fact that the Prime Minister is up here, I didn't realise he was. Ellie Smith is running here in Dixon, and she is a cracking candidate. I think what is most telling about it, though, is Ellie is running because her community has asked her to. It's not like myself or anybody from the Community Independence Project or anybody from Climate 200 had anything to do with this seat actually turning around and going, you know what, maybe we want somebody else to actually represent us. Maybe we want somebody whose primary focus is what's going on in our electorate to turn up and speak for us. And so she is definitely in with a shot, as is every other one of those 38 community independents that I spoke about. I must say, though, that at the heart of this movement, every time a community steps up and puts forward a community independent, they've already won, because they have sent a very clear message to whoever's representing them at this point in time that they do not feel heard. They do not feel like they're being adequately represented at the federal level. And the smart candidates in the major parties would actually be looking at this as a trigger for them to get more involved back in their electorate, because, naive or not, I think every single person that's sent to Parliament is primarily sent to represent the people that they live with, that they are surrounded by, and that should be their primary job. The two major parties have gotten too lost in pursuing their own political ideology. So community independence is about taking your voice and your vote back.
Kylie, thank you for joining